Okay, here's a question on standard costing or variance analysis, and it's a nice little question, and the structure is quite similar on most examinations. So we'll just get the pen ready, and if you look through it here, it gives you some information on direct materials and direct labour, and they call that the variable element of €60 per unit. Then they talk about the planned output. Again, the key word here is planned. And they give you this figure here of 12,000 units. And then they talk about another figure called fixed overheads. And the amount there is 360,000. And selling price. So the key thing here, all this information here is essentially budget. And that's the important here. Or if you like, it's the plan. And then you have to compare that with all this. And that's essentially the actual. And that's kind of fairly standard for all these type of questions. It's the budget versus the actual. And in that, you have these questions. One is to work out the budgeted profit. Then we talk about the sales variances, which is in volume and price. Then we talk about the material variance, which is in price and usage. Again, it's price and volume, and all these are really price and volume. Then we talk about the labor variances, which are rate and efficiency, or again, rate and volume, but in labor terms we call it efficiency. And finally then, fixed overhead expenditure, the variance there. Now that one is a quite straightforward one. It's actually, there it is on the page. It's the difference between that figure and that figure. It could be a lot more complicated, but in this case it's straightforward subtraction. And then we talk about possibilities of why these occur between C and D based on our answers. And that's basically if they're adverse or favourable. So the first thing is to work out the budgeted profit. And if we're talking about budget, we can only look at the first half of the question, because that's all budgeted data here. So if you think about the first part of the question, it's only going to deal with what's up here, because that's the budget. And then when we look at variances, it's really getting back to actual. So the variance, if you think about it, is a figure that when you have your budgeted figure, when you calculate your variance, then you get back to actual. And that's really the driver here with all this. You have your budget. When you move in your variance figure, you then get back to your actual figure. And that's the whole point of variances as well, to tie back to your financial statements. Okay, so let's start the question. And we should get all the stuff there in the first page. So the budgeted profit for the year. Well, again, just looking up here, there's a bit of a format we have to follow. And the first two figures we need to work out. There's a number of ways of doing it, but the quickest way is to work out the contribution, or the budgeted contribution, or the standard contribution. And that's typically calculated. We'll just put down A here. And we'll just make sure, let's put it in there. So to work out the contribution, that's typically the sales price, or the sales, if you like, less the variable cost. And in this case, it's 110, which is your standard, which is your budgeted sales price, and your variable cost is 60, and that gives you 50. Where did you get these figures? Straight here. There's your 110, and there's your 60. And we multiply that by our planned output. Again, it's all the budget, and the only activity here is 12,000. And guess what? We multiply that by 12,000. Multiply by 12,000. And that gives us a big figure of 600,000. Now the next figure after that is sales, variable costs. We have overhead or fixed overhead. And our fixed overhead figure is 3,600. Again, it's the budget figure, which therefore then gives us our budget profit. And that's A. And just for your information, when we work out all these variances, and there's there's a sales one, there's materials, and there's labor, when we do our plus minus here, whatever they are, guess what we're going to come down to? We're going to work out our actual profit. And that's very important, because again, budget plus or minus the variances, whether they're favorable or adverse, is going to bring you back to your actual profit. Just something to know as you're going through these questions. So, what's B? B was asking for your sales variances. And it doesn't matter which one we do first. It's sales volume or sales price. Okay, the price is always the easy one to do, so we'll start with the sales price. Normally put a heading here and call it sales. So price. The trick with price is you eliminate the actual first, and I would literally write that down. You eliminate the actual price first. And that's the same for all price variances. You eliminate the actual price first. Once you do that, every other variance is then based on the standard or the budget. And that rule holds right through, even when the variance calculations get extremely difficult. And that's the key to this. So, sales. So, well, what's the budget? The budget, we said, is 110. The actual is 108. Again, where to get the 108? Second part of the question. That gives us €2. And the actual activity was 12,400 units. So we multiply that and we get 24,800. Now, in variance, it's either favorable, where we put an F, or we put an A for adverse. Favorable is good news, so we're always adding to the profit, while adverse is we subtract it from profit. So ask yourself, if you budget to sell at 110 and you sell at 108, that's bad news. So therefore, that's adverse. In other words, you're going to make less profit. It's as simple as that. Sales volume. Now, there's one exception to the rule. Normally, volume, in this case, we look at the contribution. And that's the key to this. So the standard contribution is €50. Where did we work that out? We worked it back here with the €50, which is the standard contribution. And that's the figure there. 110 minus 60. So the standard contribution, sometimes you hear it as margin. You might hear it as variable contribution or variable margin, but that's the standard. And you plan to do, if you like, your plan was 12,000 units. You actually did 12,400. So there's a difference of 400. So you multiply, and 400 by 50 gives you 20,000. And you got to ask yourself, is it adverse or favorable? Well, this is sales. This is something you need to sell more. If you sell more, it's good news. Did you sell more? Actually sold more in terms of volume. The answer is yes. If you sell more, it's good news. So in terms of the overall sales, if we add the 20 and the 24,800 minus, that gives us a difference of 4,800 adverse in terms of the overall sales. And we just keep on going. Next one is C. And C was all about materials. Sorry for the writing there, it's very badly done. Materials. First one is price. So what do? We eliminate the price. Remember the rule? Here, now the key here is we look at what's used. And what drives these variances are these figures here. See what's used. And for the labor one, it's hours worked. Same thing as what's used. And it gives us the overall costs here, again on the actual. So we break it down. So based on what the price used, we had 26,000 kilos at €12, which was the standard, and that gives us 312,000. The actual, and again, it gave it to us in the question. And that is 5,200. So again, this is materials, something that will cost us money. If it costs us less, i.e. 306 versus 312, it's costing us less, that's favorable. Isn't that good news? Is there another way of calculating that? Well, of course there is. What are we comparing? We're comparing price. And in the question, it told us that we used 26,000 kilograms. And it actually cost us 306,800. So if we get our calculator, 306,800 divided by 26,000. This was actually 26,000 at 12.80. Gives us 306,800. Well, isn't that the same as, look at the two common figures. That's the exact same as, 26,000 kilograms between the difference of 12 versus 1180. And depending on how the question is phrased, it could be as simply as multiplying 26,000 at 20 pence, or at 20 pence, which is the exact same as 5,200. See what's happening. Usage. Again, really, that's just volume. Now, the key for usage on all these variants, you base it on actual production. I cannot stress that more than I can. Actual production, or the standard, was 12,400 units, and each unit has a standard of 2 kilograms. So therefore it's 24,800. However, we actually used 26,000. Remember, there's what we've told us in the question, 26,000. The difference was 1,200 kilograms. Now, what do we multiply by to get a value? Everything now is standard price. The standard price is 12. Remember, because once we eliminate the actual price here, everything is at standard price. 1,200 kilos at 12 gives us 14,400. The question is, favorable or adverse? Well, kilograms, materials, is something that you pay for, so it's a cost. Are you using, here we're using more. So if we're using more of something that's going to cost us, therefore it's adverse. And that's how you work out the logic of all this. Again, 5,200 favorable, 14,400 adverse gives us an overall adverse of 9,200. In terms of why these two things would happen, just to cover the other question, here if you're getting a favorable material price, it's because maybe the suppliers are giving you more discounts. It could mean you're having better, you have a new purchase manager who's really comparing prices and doing a good job. Also, your standard could be wrong, so it was too high in the first place. So there's loads of reasons why you can have a favorable price variance. Similarly, if you're using more, why would you use more materials? Well, you might have a theft. Someone might be stealing from you. Again, poor quality materials. Therefore, you're not getting the same usage if you use better quality materials. Remember, we've dealt with the price issue. This is just dealing with the volume issue. Or you might just have a higher standard, and therefore you have more defects, and therefore more rejects. Therefore, you're going to use more. Therefore, it's going to cost you more. In terms of the total, again, you're not asked for this in the question, but you can just check if you're right, because if you look at the actual production, which is 12,400 by 2 euro, by 2 kilograms by 12 euro, you get a huge figure here of 2,977,600. The actual cost, again, you're given that in the question, was 306,800. Therefore, and the difference is 9,200. Cost you more, therefore it's adverse. Guess what? We're on the right track. D is labor. Again, it's price and volume, or rate and efficiency. Well, we were told that the standard is to use 38 hours at 12 euro an hour. And that cost is 45,600. Again, where do I get this? Again, that's the standard figure. But it's based on the hours used. The actual is 463,600, which meant we used more by 7,600, and it's adverse. Why would we use more? Well, there might have been overtime. Again, we could have introduced shift rates or premium rates, or maybe we needed to get a different skill labour. But bottom line is, it costs us more than the €12 an hour. Again, how is the 463,600 made up of? Isn't that the same of 38,000 multiplied by, again, if we get our calculator and divide in, look, there you go. It's multiplied by 1220. So 38,000 hours by 1220 gives you 463,600. Isn't that the exact same as saying 38,000 hours by 12 minus 1220? Isn't that going to give us the same figure? In other words, it's costing us more. All we're doing is comparing the price, or in the labour terms we call it the rate. And we still get the same figure. Depending on how the question is structured, it might be easier just to work it out that way. Now the volume, or the efficiency, we'll just call it volume. Well, the standard, well no, what do we say with volume? It's actual production. I've covered that before. The 12,400 units by 3 hours is 37,200. You actually used 38,000. Where did you get the 38,000? Didn't make it up. It's up there, just above. Difference in hours, 800. I have to multiply by standard. Why? Because we've eliminated the price. So everything else is at standard. I'll start repeating myself, but that's what variances are all about. They just repeat. So you've used more. Again, this is a cost environment. So if it's costing you or using more of a cost, therefore it's an adverse. It's bad news. So 7, 6, so 2 A's, you add up the same. So therefore it's a total of 17,200 adverse in terms of total terms. Can we check this? Of course we can. The total of all this can be recalculated. Actual production is 12,400 units. We would expect to use 3 hours at €12 each. Gives it a total cost of 446,400. The actual cost, sorry, that's actual production. The actual cost is 463,600. And guess what? That's 17,200. It costs you more, so it's adverse. The last one is straightforward. It's fixed overhead. This can be a lot more complicated. The budget is 360,000. The actual, again, bottom part of the question is 355, and the difference is 5,000. Well, it's a cost environment. It's costing you less, therefore it's favourable. Good news. Good news for a change. Now, a few things to note. You haven't been asked for this in the question. We've sort of answered the other part in terms of the reasons for having a higher volume variance. Just on this one, on the labour one, just to cover that one off. Again, because you're using more hours, it means probably you've got a lot of temps in, untrained labour. Maybe it's seasonal time, so you don't expect to get the same output. There could be a training problem. Or, again, it just needs more skilled labour. So therefore you need to use more hours to get the same output. Or there could be a problem with the original standard in the first place. So just go through a few reasons on that side of it. One thing that is good in this question is we can reconcile all these figures. It's not something that we were asked for, but just to note, or the proof. We said the budgeted profit was 240,000. Remember what I said about the variances? It's bringing back to the actual. Well, let's list the variances. We had the sales price, which was 24,800, and that was bad news. We had the sales volume, which was 20,000. And we had the materials. In this case, I'm just putting the total in, but of course I can list them individually because that's a split up of two. Labor, again, it was made up of two variances, but we'll just slot in one. And the overheads, or fixed overheads, was 5,000. So because it's profit, again, remember this was favorable. This was adverse, adverse, favorable, and adverse. Guess what? When you add up all those, you come to 213,800, and that's your actual profit. Remember what I said? Budget to actual. And that's what the variance does. It helps you reconcile back. Well, can we prove the actual profit? Hold on here. Let's just see, can we get to the next page? I wonder will it give me another page? Nope. Just going to draw a line here. And if I multiply the sales, which is 108 by 22,400, I get 1,339,200. Again, if I look at my materials, labor, and the overhead, sorry, I'm squashing this in, and if I minus these three figures, 306,800, these are straight from the question, 463,600, and 355,000. These are all minus. Guess what I'm going to get? 213,800, and that just proves the actual profit. Okay. So hopefully that's a good solution on the variance analysis question.